take note of the following. David taking advice with Hashem. Remember, David has a Kohen Gadol on his side, Evyatar, the only one that escaped the massacre in the city of Nov, the only Kohen that escaped. And on David's side is this Kohen Gadol. He's not told about here, but we understand that when David takes advice with Hashem, he uses the Kohen Gadol on his side, and the Kohen Gadol is wearing the Urim v'Tumim to ask public or national matters. David is assuming that in the aftermath of no king in Israel, that this is the time maybe Hashem prophesies that he become king. He listens to the words of Hashem. He starts to be king as he's anointed, and he goes to the city of Hebron. We explained why. After some time, one of the strongest military figures in Israel, called Avner ben Ner, who was the military expert for Shaul, from the tribe of Benjamin, he decides, and not haphazardly, but based upon Torah, he's a scholar, that this is the time to bring the second king of the tribe of Benjamin. Shaul was the first one. And this is the fulfillment of the words of Hashem. As it states, Menachem mechalatzecha yetzeu, and kings shall go out from your loins. Interesting enough, both parties, Yoav, the head of the army of David, Avner, the head of the army for Shaul, decide to travel to Givon, which is in the heart of Benjamin. And they decide together, but started by Avner, let's sport together, let's practice or train together physically. Well accepted. Behind the scenes, what we are aware of is that the two women that are building the Jewish people, we're talking about, did I say something wrong?
No.
Okay. Eavesdropping.
There's a cat running around.
Give her a sign that she's not allowed to be there. And whatever you can use regarding cats. There's no one here to tell. Shakach. I want to remember Beit Leah and Beit Rachel. Two households that from these two women are comprised the 12 tribes. Both of them are building Israel. However, right now there's tension. There's tension between Beit Leah, the house built by Leah, which is the tribe of Judah, and others, and the tribes that are coming out of Rachel, namely Yosef and Benjamin. Yosef and Benjamin. You've heard of the name Yosef? Okay. In the last years, rumors, statements have been spread, not in David's favor. Not in David's favor. Because Shaul has been after him, as if he's done something wrong. We know from the perspective of Tanakh and Chazal, not only is David innocent, but David is a chassid. He goes above and beyond what the law is calling for. On several occasions, he could have ended the tension by killing someone that's threatening his life, and he decided not to. Why? He doesn't want to touch Mashiach Hashem. Someone that's anointed from God, he doesn't want to touch it. In future generations, people might make mistakes and assassinate leaders. And therefore, David has chosen this path. David is a man with Toda Rabba. How much kama chayivim lecha? רק לחייך. כשר? כשר. Amen. So, if we get back after eating these chiyuchim, it has a smile on them. That's what's called a chiyuch. It has a smile on them. You got to get your dosage of sugar today, don't you? So, the tension is there. What happens after the sport began? We saw a terrible thing. Fighting. Bloodshed. Now, you might have thought, Avner ben Ner, who started this matter, behind Avner ben Ner stands how many tribes? 10 tribes. Behind Yoav ben Tzruya, the nephew of David, stands Yehuda, maybe Shimon as well, but more or less basically Yehuda. The terrible clash, we're told here in the Tanakh that Avner ben Ner really is the one that starts, and we'll read the numbers today. What is the result? Remember, Asael, who in Chazal, we could have picked a few midrashim, but we didn't, is so fleet, is so fast, is so special, that even if he runs in a wheat field, he wouldn't even bend the barleys or stalks of wheat. That's what Chazal, of course, in a metaphorical, narrative way, talk about his great abilities. Each of the three sons of Tzruya, Yoav, Avishai, Asael, are brilliant fighters. Avner ben Ner is solid. The Gemara talks about him. He's solid, and even though he's solid, and he's like he can break through a wall of several meters or whatever. The Gemara talks about his abilities. He's no less fast than Asael, and in fact, we see that he is a sharpshooter. Running in one direction, he uses his cherev, his sword, in the other direction, and precisely kills Asael in the ribs. And as we learned at the end of the shiur, Yoav opens pursuit after Avner because he thinks that Avner did not do what the halachic matter is, that if he had to defend himself against his brother Asael, he should have only have injured him and not taken away his life. Finally, at the end of where we learned yesterday in Pasuk Kaf Daled Kaf Hey, the Binyamin people are running away towards the Midbar of Giv'on, the desert, namely going east. We only have a desert going east towards the Jordanian valley, towards the Midbar Yudah, the Judean desert.
He's running there?
And we see here the people of Binyamin, Pasuk Kaf 25, Vaytkaptzu v'nei Binyamin achrei Avner, vayu laguda echat, vayamdu arosh keva achat. Here we see that the people of Binyamin basically are ready for war. How do we know they're ready for war? Aleph, they're gathered together. Number two, they're in aguda achat, they're unified. Number three, they're standing, vayamdu, they're ready. And they're all on one hill. In other words, they're not dispersed. They are organized and they're ready. And this again is a shame. And who calls out to stop it? Avner himself. He sees the situation and he pleads for what we call a Heskem Shalom, a peace treaty. As we saw yesterday, Avner calls out to Yoav, what, forever is it going to be a war against ourselves? A civil war against Jews? Okay, the word cherev, ochelet. You see the word? There's an expression in the Tanakh that the sword eats, devours. It's an expression, it's an idiom. Even to the fact that the sharp end of a sword in the Tanakh is called peh. Do you remember the valiant, courageous leader of Israel that had a double-edged sword that went and assassinated? Eglon was assassinated, king of Moab. Ehud, very good. Ehud ben Gera, as we learned in the former Sefer Shoftim, he had a double-edged sword, and there was called cherev pipiot, or pifiot. So you see, metaphors of a mouth, of eating, of devouring, are attached to the word cherev, tochal cherev, as we see here as well. However, in even that Avner is asking for peace, in Pasuk Kav Zayin, let's reread what we ended the shore yesterday. Yoav puts the cards on the table. Who is responsible for the bloodshed? Vayomer Yoav. Yoav is opposite this hilltop where the men of Binyamin are gathered, led by Avner. And Yoav says, Chai Elokim, he takes an oath. Ki lulei dibarta. Had you not opened up your mouth, had you not spoken, remember, who was the one that initiated to go to do the sports together that led to the bloodshed? Who was the one that asked to do it? Avner. So he's saying, he's pointing a finger. Halo dibarta, you're at fault. You started this. This which led to bloodshed. He's saying, lulei dibarta. Had you not spoken, then all of this would not have happened. Okay, all of this with Nadav, he's taking an oath. Okay, and what does he finally continue to say? Ki az me'aboker na'ala ha'am. Already from the morning, the sides have dispersed. Ish me'acharei achiv. Now they're dispersed. My men, Yoav says, are not with you, with me rather, and they're dispersed. But okay, I'm going to accept the peace. And what does Yoav do? Vayetka Yoav b'shofar. He sounds the shofar as a sign of the cease war that's happening here. Okay, he doesn't want to continue. The shofar is sounded, and what? Notice, what do the both sides do? There no more fighting, no more pursuit. As a result, in Kaftet, okay, remember, all of the men of Benjamin are standing east of the Benjamin area towards going down to the desert to escape Yoav and his men, even though Avner is the majority, representing the majority of tribes. So we're told there in Kaftet 29, as we're coming towards the tail end of the chapter, V'Avner v'Anashav halchu ba'arava. They're traveling in the desert area, kol alaylo. They don't stop. They don't rest. At nighttime, they're descending in altitude, going down to the Jordan Valley. We all know where their capital is, on the other side of the Jordan we mentioned. Do you remember? In Machanayim. They're traveling all night long. Vayavru et HaYarden. They cross the Jordan River. Vayachul kol abitaron. Abitaron are the downhill areas of certain parts of the valley. They say, Vayavo Machanem, they arrive on the other side, they're safe. What about the opponents? Unfortunately, the Jewish opponents from the tribe of Yehuda, Pasuk Lamed V'Yoav, Shav Me'achorei Avner. He went in the other direction. He doesn't travel in the same direction, he's going back home. Where does he go back home to? Where are they going to be traveling to? Chevron. But what does he do first? Vayikbot et kol ha'am. We say several times the term ha'am doesn't mean nation. Ha'am means any collective unit. Here it means the forces that were with him together, okay? So don't misunderstand the term ha'am. He collects the forces together. Now, if you're a high-ranking officer, why do you collect your forces together? What do you do it for? What purpose?
To give like a speech or...
Speech could be one. What else? Preparing them. What else? A mifaked is counting. Okay, he wants to make a mifkad. He wants to make a counting. He wants to see, God forbid, who is not around, meaning who died. Vayipakdu. And he sees there are people that are missing after counting them. Me'avdei David, how many? Tisha, Asar Ish, Va'asael. Notice, 19 is a number, and Asael is separate. Maybe because isn't Asel, the question is asked, isn't he one of the servants, the officers of David? So why is he separate? Rather, Rashi brings the name of Chazal, Asael Shakul Keneged Kulam. He's so important, he's so vital, he's as if he's equal to all the rest of the forces. That's what a loss it means for the side of Yoav. Not only a brother, but he was a superior officer with beyond regular talents of war. Okay, which we have to use against our real enemies and not civil enemies. Okay, and therefore he's counted by himself aside. You see that? Pasuk Lamed Aleph. V'avdei David hikumi Binyamin uve'anshei Avner 360 ish metu. In other words, in the former war around the pool of Givon, where the strife and the clash began, in addition to probably people that were injured, there were 360 members of Binyamin that were killed, which in and of itself, we should be mourning for that and crying for that 360 Jews. But if you were to be the political or military analyst, you would say that's a tremendous victory on whose side? Yoav, the tribe of Yehuda. Unfortunately, okay, and here we see what we call in Hebrew a nitzachon muflag. A nitzachon muflag, an amazing victory, even though the tribe of Yehuda is only one, the forces of Yoav is only one tribe, where here we see behind Avner ben Ner could be 10 tribes. We don't know how many people were there, but clearly hundreds died, which is tragic, but showing certainly the superior abilities, King David, of Yoav and his soldiers. The end of the chapter. Vayisuet Asael. They're carrying him, the dead body, to bring him to burial. And where is he brought to burial? Vayikberu bekever aviv asher Beit Lachem. Asael, like the family of David, grew up in the city of Beit Lechem. Okay? When we just leave southern Yerushalayim, Yosef, we arrive to the first city of Judea, and that is Beit Lechem. It's very close today to the southern neighborhood of Gilo, for instance. Okay? Beit Lechem, and that's where David grew up, of course, as we learned in Shmuel, Sefer Shmuel. So too, this family, well, it's David's sister's family, remember. So he's brought to burial in the family plot in Beit Lechem. Their significance, they're keeping the family tradition, okay? They're united. And now, after burial, notice what Yoav and his forces do. Vayelchu chol halayla. Yoav v'anashav vayeor lahem bechevron. Isn't this interesting? Instead of resting in Beit Lechem, and let's just say if we were to measure the distance, I would only suggest that we're talking about 30 or more kilometers from Beit Lechem going south to Hebron. That's a trip at night, okay? This is before Benjamin Franklin. It is. So there's no night lighting and so on and so forth. They go through the entire night. They don't want to stop. They want to get to Hebron. They want to get home. They want to get to David. And it seems that the concept that they arrive vayeor lahem. Vayeor lahem. We can understand the term vayeor lahem from the time of night or day, as well as a time that relates to values. Physically, they arrive at dawn. Or is beaking from the east on the city of Hebron. They go through the entire night of traveling and they arrive in the morning. Well, is this a diary book that we have to know when they arrived? Rather, the more pnimi, more inner, intrinsic understanding, they arrive to Hebron. Hebron now is being illuminated with the ideals, the morals of a David. David is Ohev Yisrael. When they get to Hebron, they find the spiritual, ideological light of David warming to them, illuminating to them. And that's how this passage ends. Tragedy in Israel, tension between Beit Leah and Beit Rachel, civil war, hundreds of Jews are killed. Certainly David was not interested in this, as we'll learn later more about his figure, his personality, his midot, as we learn about him. Certainly David is not happy about this. Let's see, because we're going to learn later, David, remember, is not pushing himself, not upon his own people, the tribe of Judah, and certainly not upon the house of Shaul. He tried. The supporters of Shaul, the people of Yavesh Gilad, that brought Shaul eventually to burial, to get their attention, to get their support. No. He doesn't say, pretty please, bevakasha, I deserve it. No, David has humility, and David has savlanut, time. He waited a while to become king. He didn't push himself. He had a prophecy that he's going to become king. He didn't beg and say, well, let it be now. He played the game. This is a political, ideological, spiritual game. Whenever the times will appear, it appears. Now it has appeared, but he doesn't what? He's not pushing himself. He waited. Not only did he wait to be anointed, the people of Yehudah came to him and said, we want you to be our king. So that's where we stand right now. David is now melech over all of Yehudah, which is a major tribe, maybe the most populous of all tribes that we have today, meaning here. And now let's go on to the next episode and see what's happening. Yes?
So during this whole episode, where are the police team? Considering they just won the war?
Very good. The wars of the Plishtim, ever since they arrived on the scene during the time of Avram Avinu, okay, they have been a thorn in the eyes of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and the nation of Israel ever since Yoshua. We have yet to eliminate this enemy that's sitting in southwestern Israel, Kiryat Gat, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza Strip area. They've won several wars, including the war when Eli died. They took into captivity the Aron. They won this last war. And according to statistics, they really hit us hard. What did they do? They go back home. They go back home. Right now, they're a thorn in our eyes. Let's maybe mention what we mentioned in the past. In the book of Habakkuk, one of the small prophets, we mentioned this in Sefer Shmuel Aleph, the Vilna Gaon, heard of the Gaon of Vilna. His commentary, he explains that the Plishtim, this entity called the Plishtim, their objective in the world is to oppose sovereignty of the nation of Israel on the land of Israel. And whenever things stir up that we're taking sovereignty, spiritually, ideologically, they are aroused and they try to combat. They try to clash. They've been successful several times. Yes, on the one-on-one match between Goliath and David won the match. But otherwise, right now we've suffered several losses. So what did they do? They go back to their own place. We were devastated on the Gilboa mountain. David knows it. Right now, it's not an issue. He's not going up against him. Let's now learn about the new coming family of David. Perek Gimel. Vatihima amilchama aruka. No, the strife does not stop now. The clashes go on. The tension goes on. Do you see this, David? Hamilchama aruka bein Beit Shaul uvein Beit David, the two homes, the two leaderships. And what happens as time goes on? The Tanakh tells us, v'David holech v'chazek, uveit Shaul holchim v'dalim. Okay? The Malbim explains here, one of the great later commentators, that for this first 2 years of Ishbosheth ruling over these 10 tribes, more or less, he was successful. Okay? But the truth is that in the next coming years, he is losing control. We mentioned this in the last chapter. Namely, in the next upcoming 5 years, many Jews across the 10 tribes of northern Israel are leaving their support from Ishbosheth, and they're beginning to give their support to David instead. We see this clearly in Divrei Yamim. If we open up the book of Chronicles, which is a summary of the Tanakh, there we see in Perek Yud Bet, chapter 12, accounts of members of other tribes leaving the support of the Binyamin tribe and now joining hands. So what's happening now is that over a period of time, the setting is becoming more ripe for David to become Melech over all of Israel, which will be the first monarchy, leadership over all of Israel, as the prophets tell us, or as the section of the Kings tells us in the book of Devarim. And now, let's learn about the family David is building. Let's remember, David is holy. David is a chassid. And of course, David is interested in building a great home. He takes various wives. Each wife is different. Each wife has different character traits. And there's a likelihood that each wife that he takes is not just a Mrs. Sally or Lucy or this or that. She must be a very, very special woman. And the likelihood that out of the cross between a David and each wife, the likelihood that tigers, strong, idealistic, people with great energies and abilities will be born from these marriages. Because now the Tanakh decides to tell us the names of his wives and the names of their children. Why? It's not a history book, but apparently to share with us some spiritual significance. So let's begin. Vayivaldu leDavid banim bechevron. Dafka in Chevron, the city of Chibur, a connection to God, a connection to Am Yisrael, a connection to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and the ideals of the forefathers. Number one, Vayi v'choro Amnon, lachino Yisraelit. Amnon, the Bechor is Amnon. Some explain in the Midrash that he comes from the name Ne'eman. He's faithful, he's loyal, he's chazak, he's yatziv. And he's born to this first woman, as we met, Achinoam Yisraelit. Number two, Umishneu Chilav, or Kilav, to who? His wife, La'achinoam, Lavigail, Eshet Naval HaKarmali. Kilav. In spite of the name Kilav, if we open up Divrei Yamim and we see the names of the families of David, we see the name Daniel. Daniel. The Midrash explains that Hashem judged David favorably. Do you remember the meeting? David is like a fugitive. He's fleeing for life. He has hundreds of people with him and they have no food whatsoever. They've reached the Carmel area, the southern Hebron Mountains area, and he has no food. He goes into the camp of Naval HaKarmali, who happens to be paying off his debts because it's summertime. He is sharing his sheep, you remember? And that's big time, big money. He's a very wealthy person. And David says, can I have a few, pieces of cheese, some lamb chops? I have hundreds of people. David is well known as a military leader of Israel. No one knows really that Shaul is out to kill him and so on and so forth. And what does Naval do? Just like his name is. He is ingracious. Okay? And he badmouths David and makes nothing out of him. And David, by law, what should he have done? Should have killed him. But he didn't. He salvaged, he saved his life. So he's called Daniel, the kid that he has now with his wife left, right? His wife left Naval, Mrs. Abigail. And now they have a child. And Chazal say, Hashem danoto mecherpat Naval. He wanted to kill Naval, but God judged him and allowed him not to kill him. And that's the reason for the name Daniel. So why does he have another name? Kilav. What is Kilav? Kimo Av. He's similar to his father. Gentlemen, remember the upcoming point. David is not supported by everyone in the country. There are still people that think that David, Aleph, comes from an unlawful Giur family. Who is his great-grandmother? Ruth. And people are arguing that the Giur and the marriage of Boaz to Mrs. Ruth is unlawful. And therefore David is unlawful, he's not a kosher Jew, and so on and so forth. There are people that badmouth this matter, so don't think that David is on easy street. Number two, now in this generation, people are saying, this newborn baby to Mrs. Abigail, we know who the father is. The father is Naval, and not David. What did Hashem do, the Midrash says? Formed the formulation of the face of the baby, and that he's like the spitting image of David, in order to alleviate him from all this criticism by people saying, you're not the father of this child, because not long ago did Mrs. Abigail leave her husband. So that's the name of Kilav, Kimo Av. He has klaster panim of Av. Did we see that anywhere in the Chumash?
Probably, if you're asking.
Who remembers David? Where do we see that they were late Senei Hador criticizing someone, saying, you're not the father, he comes from someone else?
Yitzchak.
Excellent. Yitzchak. What were people arguing and saying?
It's from the king of the
Plishtim. Avimelech, Melech Plishtim. Very good. So what did Hashem do?
and was the face of Yitzchak to Abraham.
As it states, Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham holid et Yitzchak. Why does the Torah say Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak? We all know that he gave birth to Yitzchak. Answer, Yitzchak carried the same facial traits that his father carried to thwart away any criticism that, God forbid, the father is that Gentile, the king of Gerar. Very good. Okay, so we have Mr. Kilav. Hashlishi, Avshalom ben Ma'acha. Ma'acha, we're going to later learn, was an Eshet Yafat Toar. Do you remember the term, expression in Eshet Yafat Toar? There are two types of wars that we can go to. We can go to Milchemet Mitzvah, and we can also go to Milchemet Rishut, a non-obligatory war. The Torah spoke about the Yetzer Hara of soldiers at a war, that they're far from home, their wives are not there, they're allowed lawfully to take pretty women if they want to, in their eyes, and marry them. The truth is The Torah connects the section of Eshet Yafat Toar to another section. Which one is it? Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious son, section in the book of Devarim. So this woman, Ma'acha, was a Gentile woman, taken by David in one of the many wars that he had. And they say that she's the daughter, it says, of Talmai. Talmai was one of the giants that was living in the Hebron area, Talmai. In any event, she does Gior, for whatever it means. And
Talmai is the son of David and Melech?
Talmai is the mother, it says here, the grandmother of Ma'acha. I'm sorry, the grandfather of Ma'acha. And he was a giant in Hebron, Melech Geshur. Some say he originated in the southern Golan area, but the original Talmai was in the area of Hebron. Nonetheless, we have a new son called Avshalom.
He's the one who rebelled later.
That's right. Why is he called Avshalom? Father of peace. He's bringing peace to the world. Hashem is bringing peace to the world. So all these names have a lot of idealism as we go on to the fourth son. Varivi'i Adoniah ven Chagit. Okay? Chagit, some say she was born on a holiday, one of the Chagim. So this is another wife. And why Adoniah? Adoniah. Adoni, yeah. My master is Yah. Hashem's name. Very good. So also here, that the name of God is my master. And Chagit, we do not learn throughout the Tanakh from where she's from. She could be a Chevroni woman from the tribe of Judah there. And some say that she was born during one of the Chagim. Number 5, Hachamishi, Shfatia ben Avital. Shfatia sounds like a Hebrew name of a man called Yehoshaphat, or Yoshaphat, or Elishaphat, some of the commentators explain. But what do they all have in common? That Hashem is the judge. Very good. Do you see that? Shvatia, that God is the judge. We don't know anything about Avital. Where is she from? And let's go now to the last one. Vashishi Yitraam Le'egla Eshet David. Interesting. Is this the only one that's called Eshet David of all the 6? Of all the 6, she's the only one that's called Eshet David. Why? Question 1. Second, what is the name Eglah?
It's a woman.
The woman's name. Oh, so it could be a woman's calf. So we have a term in the Tanakh. If you want to call a pretty woman, what is she called? Eglah Yafefiyah. It's a term, it's a kinoi, it's a nickname of love or affection for a woman. Chazal say the following. This woman, who's nicknamed Eglah, is no one but Michal. Michal, the daughter of Shaul. Okay? Now we might understand better why she and she only is called Eshet David. Because she was the former wife of David. We can raise a major question. Didn't Shaul hand her over to Paltiel, as we saw? You know, you can't go back and remarry David if she was married to someone else. So there are several answers that we're going to give here. According to Chazal, the Radak brings several of them, that she was really never married by Paltiel. She was in the bullpen waiting. She was waiting because the time that the father Shaul, King Saul, handed her over to Paltiel, Shaul was assuming that David's going to die in one of the upcoming wars as soon as possible. And therefore, she was preserved by Paltiel, but never was there a consummation of marriage, never was she taken to no marital relations, and therefore she originally remained as an Eshet Ish to David. Is one of the answers that Chazal give. And Chazal explain the grace of this person called Paltiel, that Hashem El Paltiel, Hashem Palatoti, Hashem saved me. He could have had relations with her. She was an Eshet Ish, which is an Isur Doraita, of course, right? A Torah prohibition. Yet God rescued me of having relations. We know the Yetzer Hara for Arayot is very strong. Yet he was saved by God. He never did have relations with her. Therefore, leaving her, remaining as an Eshet Ish to David, and not marriage to Paltiel. So that's one of the answers how she can come over to be the Eshet David. The Tanakh emphasizes Eli Yudule David bechevron. Chevron is a city of values. Chevron is a city of chibur, like it's written in the holy books, like in the Zohar, that Chevron is the entrance to Gan Eden. Chevron in the land of Israel is parallel to the spiritual entrance to Gan Eden, such a holy place, and therefore it's a chibur, bein olam hazeh to the future world. Chibur, Chevron from the word chibur, connection, chaverim, together. We can end today's shur and say that David has a vast family. He has 6 wives. Okay? Remember, today, not only are we not allowed to have that, but we're not even capable of having 2 wives. I can vouch for you, 1 is enough. 1 is even difficult. That's a big challenge. At the same time, we're told about these prestigious women, apparently, and the names of these prestigious kids. These are children that are going to grow up in Hebron under the tutelage, the education of a David, and they can be great. But we're going to see they can be great in different ways. If the successful channeling is to the proper direction, they're stars. But if they go off the derech, they can be stars in the negative ways. And we're going to see that David is a very complex family, and he has several kids that really are rebelling. For this and more, we'll continue tomorrow. Shalom.